Story 1. December 31st, 1998. I was 17 when I had my first and by far my worst heroin overdose on New Year's Eve morning. We had been partying the night before, and I was still very new to using heroin, mostly snorting it. I wasn't yet able to inject myself. The last thing I remember is waking up in my best friend Tony's bedroom around 7 to 8 in the morning. Everyone was still asleep, so I pulled a bag out of my pocket and snorted the whole thing. The next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes to the horror of being strapped to a hospital bed, tubes in every opening, and worst of all, a large tube down my throat that I was gagging on. I had no idea what was happening, but my mom and Tony were actually there when I woke up, almost a month later and in a completely different year. I still had no understanding of everything, crying hysterically and gagging on my tears. I wanted to know what was going on, though deep down I think I already knew. I locked eyes with my mother and then looked at my restrained right hand. She understood and looked there, so I acted out writing with a pen in my hand. She got that I was asking for a pen and pad, which she brought. I furiously scribbled what happened, and I will never forget the look she gave me when she responded. You overdosed and you've been in a coma for weeks. You were dead when they found you. Tony said I looked like a smurf because I was so blue. It took another couple of weeks to learn how to walk again. In early 1999, people were not okay with what I did, and I constantly got yelled at by nurses and orderlies. By this point, I had noticeable brain damage, was not my old self, and couldn't even defend myself. Thankfully, it took about a year, but mentally I mostly recovered. For a time, I actually cleaned up my act and moved as far away as I could from my hometown. It's a story I don't like to think about much, but if it helps convince anyone to stay away from opioids, then it will have been worth telling. Good night and thanks for reading. Story 2. My mom and I were almost murdered when I was a child. He cut the phone wires in the house. He said he was going to get the biggest knife in the kitchen and cut us into little pieces. The only thing that saved us was that I had a phone in my room disguised as a teddy bear. He had no clue. I was able to call for help, and the police came and took him away. Story 3. I was forcibly removed from the front passenger seat of a car by the force known as kinetic energy. The transfer of energy was initiated by the driver going 70 miles per hour down a county road and hitting a small hill that elevated the front wheels from the ground just slightly. Upon returning to the surface, the wheels had turned a few degrees, causing the car to slide. During the slide, the rear wheels hit some dirt, accelerating them past the front. We were going completely sideways, and the brakes were useless. However, like Willwood Brake's slogan goes, if you want to stop any faster, hit a wall. In this case, a rather large tree. I was ejected, hit, and rolled up the tree, 13 feet 4 inches up. A piece of bark was missing. Later found a half-inch from my spine. Huge scar. At some point, my face was ripped open, and my ear had a new hole as well. Piece of glass was in my head. I woke up, walked to the ambulance, and later learned the fate of the others. 1 dead, 2 injured, 14 stitches in my cheek, 11 in my ear, 5 staples in my head, and super glue on my arm. For a brief moment I flew. Life goes on. Stay safe, everyone. Story 4. My oldest sister, who is 10 years older, got me 17 years old very drunk. I blacked out and woke up in my bed, alone, completely covered in vomit. Somehow it was on the opposite side of my head from where I was lying. I had no memory of throwing up and was still very drunk. I couldn't walk, so I crawled to the bathroom and showered. I sat on the floor of the tub to wash the vomit out of my hair. Then I slept on the couch because I was too drunk to deal with the vomit. The next morning, I was very hungover, and she just laughed at me. I cleaned my bed the next day and moved on. Now that I'm 27, I see that was very negligent of her. I could have aspirated. This is exactly how people die from partying. Later, I asked her why she got me so drunk. She said she wanted to teach me a lesson about drinking. So she was force-feeding me shots after she knew I had blacked out, to make me so drunk that I would understand what it is. She never apologized. She still laughs about it 10 years later and thinks it was funny. Story 5. A friend and I used to stand next to train tracks when trains would pass by when I was 16 to 17 years old. One night, my friend was crouched in front of me by about 3 feet. All of a sudden, he jumped out of the way. He jumped because there was a metal pole hanging off the side of the train. I had to twist my body to avoid it hitting me in the stomach. It would have either ripped me in half or dragged me for who knows how far. Either way, I think the outlook was grim. Story 6. Riptide a few years ago when I was 41. I have always loved and feared the ocean, and as long as I can remember, I have spent every minute I could floating and jumping waves. I went in the waves with my cousin, and when I realized I was struggling, I asked her for help. She said she could not help me because she was struggling too. We could not touch the bottom, the waves were big and frequent, and we were far away from the beach. I realized what was happening then, a rip current. I told her it would eventually dump us back to shore, to keep her head afloat, stay calm, and grab my hand. We were pretty far down the bay when we got out. On the way back to our family, I told people to get their children out of the ocean. It was the scariest thing I have ever been through. I thought I was going to be the news story that I worried about every year. Story 7. I will go first. When I was in 6th grade, I had a staphylococcus infection that started on my stomach and then spread to my genitals and left leg. I was too scared to tell my parents, and they found out after seeing pus and blood on my shirt. I told them I had it for about 2 weeks, so they sent me to the doctor to get antibiotics. I was diagnosed incorrectly, so the infection came back after about a week. I went to a different doctor and had a blood test done which confirmed the staphylococcus infection. I then received the correct antibiotics. The doctor said that if I had kept it hidden for another 2 weeks, I could have died from sepsis or other bacterial complications. It is strange because I lied to my parents saying I had the infection for only 2 weeks, but I had actually had it for a month. I was very lucky I did not have to go to the hospital and escape death. Story 8. Helicopter almost hitting high-tension lines. I flew as an aircrewman in the Marines back in the late 1980s. I was flying and training with Spanish troops through the mountains of Spain. The crew chief and I were responsible for the rear 180 degrees of the helicopter for clearance, while the pilot managed the front 180 degrees. I was sitting there staring out the window when suddenly the helicopter pitched nose high abruptly, followed by the pilot exclaiming. Just then, I saw a large cable miss our rear main landing gear by inches. This was a thick cable stretching between mountains, about 2 to 3 inches in diameter. We would have been done for sure. Story 9. About a month ago, I was in a small skydiving plane that crashed off the end of the runway into trees at approximately 115 miles per hour. It was a completely surreal experience. I am very injured, and it might be a while before I am able to skydive again, but I am excited that everyone survived. Story 10. Swimming at the sea with friends without a lifeguard. We decided to return to the shore, and after a while of swimming, I realized I was not getting closer. I got tired and started panicking before my 2 meters tall friend helped me out. Story 11. Wernicke encephalopathy resulted from a failed gastric bypass and severe malnutrition caused by the surgery. At the time, I weighed 85 pounds and had holes in my brain. A feeding tube was inserted into my stomach, and I weighed 100 pounds when the surgery was reversed. Aside from the brain damage, I am now completely healthy and a mother. I became pregnant with my first child 4 months after the surgery, thanks to the lockdown. Story 12. In Bangkok, Thailand, the ride-hailing driver was lost on the freeway and pulled into a no-go zone on the slip lane of the freeway exit. Half the car was in the first lane, and cars swerved to avoid us. While he was distracted looking at his map, I saw behind us an 18-wheeler with LED lights covering every square centimeter of the front, traveling at approximately 150 kilometers per hour, blaring its foghorn with no signs of stopping. The driver pulled in at the last second. Felt like a wall of death coming toward us. Never again. Story 13. Almost drowned in a swimming pool when I was 6. Almost drowned in the ocean when I was 7. Seriously nearly died in a car accident when I was 18. Story 14. I was trying to help a car that crashed in front of me. The driver was under the influence of drugs, and suddenly accelerated across lanes into a fence. Luckily, I was on the other side of the car. Story 15. Cancer. Then, my ex-wife suffered a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night shortly after. I gave CPR. She had another one while in the intensive care unit 2 days later. I nursed her back to health. She made it. Then, my ex-wife cheated on me and made me see the acts and read the texts, humiliating me to the men. I stopped chemotherapy after that. I made a friend on Reddit who saved me. Story 16. I am severely allergic to nuts. A child at school gave me a cookie containing peanuts. He lied and said there were none because he wanted to see what would happen. Story 17. 1. Lightning hit a tree near me. 2. A friend decided to play with a gun and grazed my shoulder. 3. I accidentally overdosed. 4. 2 separate allergic reactions caused me to stop breathing. 5. Medical neglect by my mother. 6. Complications during surgery. 7. Suicide attempt. I either have horrible luck or the best luck, and I am not sure which. Story 18. I have posted this before. I was off-piste in the French Alps when a blizzard hit. 6 British soldiers died in the same blizzard during winter training. I found a small lookout hut quite high up overlooking the Alps. I thought it was a nice spot to have a smoke and a swig or two from the flask. I was geared up with thermals, multi-layer waterproof clothing, a hydration pack, and my snowboard. No food, though. It was around 2 p.m. As I was sitting and enjoying the view, I saw black clouds rolling fast over the mountains. I am from Australia and have snowboarded everywhere except the United States and Canada, but I had never experienced or seen a blizzard. I immediately knew what it was. I cannot describe it, but survival mode kicked in. I had to get off this mountain and back to town. The only problem was that it had taken me 3 to 4 hours to get there, searching for virgin runs. Within minutes of starting off, the blizzard hit. I had a Samsung phone with about 60% battery. I watched as the temperature on my phone dropped from -6 to -22 degrees Celsius. The lowest it got was -35 degrees Celsius, and my phone turned off because it was too cold for the battery to work. My visibility was less than a meter, and it had gone dark. I was making my way down a steep mountain. So much snow had fallen that it was leveling out the slope. I could not snowboard down. I literally lay flat on my board like a surfboard to get through. This was the hardest part. I was far from shelter, still acclimating to the sudden cold and lower oxygen levels. I remember this so clearly. I found some cover cut out in the rock wall and leaned back against it. I was sweating, puffing, and exhausted. I remember thinking, just open your jacket a little bit, let some cold air in to cool down, maybe have a nap and a little breather before continuing. But my mind then said no. Your thermals will instantly freeze, and you will never wake up from that sleep. I got up and kept walking. Snowboarding was impossible. I was waist deep in snow. Eventually, I reached a part one knew that required a bit of cross-country skiing until the next slope. I also knew that after the cross-country section, most of the slopes were steeper, and I would definitely be able to snowboard to Val d'Isère. I ran into a British couple while on the trail. They were huddled against a tree. I ran to them, stumbled, and ran more. They were the first people I had seen. We were all crying. We agreed to stick together, and I knew the way. The altitude was much lower now, and visibility was better. The blizzard was still strong but dissipating. We literally trudged, crawled, and dragged ourselves the rest of the way. Exhaustion did not allow us to keep balance or snowboard or ski down. The British couple had skis. Eventually, we made it to a road. Police, buses, and medical crews were moving between the towns, picking up people escaping and trying to rescue anyone known to be stuck. This was around 2014. I still remember it like yesterday, and it gets the heart pounding. Story 19. I was crossing a highway, and in the median I had a blackout seizure. I was hit by an oncoming car and I flipped. Story 20. Walking along a footpath near my house, a neighbor decided to pull his car onto his front lawn without properly looking. Fortunately, another neighbor was a major incident control assistant paramedic, and she helped me start breathing again. Story 21. When I was born, The umbilical cord was tightly wrapped around my neck, and they did not know how long I had been without oxygen. Apparently, I was blue-gray, and they managed to save me just in time. Story 22. Diabetic ketoacidosis when I was 10. Flight for life to the nearest emergency room 1 hour away by car. Spent a few days in a coma. Paramedics said if my parents had waited 10 more minutes, I would have died. I did not technically die, but I do remember tunnel vision and seeing a bright light at the end of it. Story 23. This was basically asked yesterday. This was my reply. I had about a half-dozen brushes with death. Story 24. Tried to save petrol money by rolling my old Toyota Corolla down the Kaimai Ranges in neutral. I figured gravity was a better deal using my precious student fuel money. Hit a patch of drizzle, lost all brake pressure, and suddenly I was doing my best rocket laboratory impression straight toward a stock truck full of very confused cows. I swerved, clipped a mailbox, and ended up parked backwards in someone's hedge. Story 25. First time. Got hit by shrapnel, chased by terrorists, sent to an African prison where the wound went septic and I contracted malaria. Second time. My doctor kept ignoring my symptoms while I kept getting sicker. Finally, my husband took me to the emergency room where they said I needed emergency surgery. My heart stopped during the surgery. Story 26. Fell off a bar stool when I was 4 and cracked my head open. Got caught in a riptide when I was 9 during a family vacation in Hawaii. Choked on marshmallows at church camp when I was 15 while playing Chubby Bunny. Brutal car accident at 17. Aspirated my own vomit at 24. Suicide attempt at 27. Alcohol intoxication at a bar during my 29th birthday. Passed out while standing up and cracked my head open again. I am not dead yet. Story 27. Oh man. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 11. I have had far too many hypoglycemic episodes to count. The lowest my blood sugar has been is 18 milligrams per deciliter, and I still remained conscious. I once went a week without insulin because it was either paying rent or buying food for my kids. It was the longest and most painful time of my life compressed into 1 week. I should have died. Other than that, I have been in a dozen or more car accidents, broken many bones in various ways, been stabbed twice, held at gunpoint, nearly bled to death, and stalked by a mountain lion. There is more to share with many details, but yes, I have survived a lot. Story 28. I was run off the highway by a car driven by someone who was targeting my mom's car. They repeatedly crashed into us and tried to shoot us through the window. I was about 8 years old. We weren't even the intended target. My little sister had a kitten and a new tricycle in the back. There was a drive-by shooting at my aunt's house when I was very young. I had my face shoved into the floor the entire time. I fell 10 feet onto concrete and severed an artery. I had a blood clot in my lungs and passed out at school. There was an incident of arson. Once, I drove home to my new apartment, a loft on stilts, and found my downstairs neighbor in my parking spot aiming a shotgun at me. I drove away and never had issues with him again. Story 29. I was molested and almost abducted from a movie theater when I was 10 or 11 years old. I had just tried to go see a movie with my friend, and the next thing I knew, this man was fondling me through the back of the seat and then tried to follow us out of the theater. Thankfully, another man in the theater noticed what was happening and stood up to confront him, so the man ran out of the emergency exit at the front of the theater. The theater where the movie was showing was at the very back of the building, so it would not surprise me if he had planned to grab one or both of us and take us out the exit back there. Story 30. One time I almost accidentally hung myself in the 2nd grade. In 4th grade, I almost drowned while on vacation. In 6th grade, I almost choked on a meatball. In 8th grade, I almost drowned in the school pool. Story 31. Snakes in a very deep and dangerous cave. Now I can't believe I went down and am thankful that I was not bitten by the colorful and venomous water snakes all around my feet while wearing sandals. I would never have returned to the surface alive. Story 32. Meningitis led to gangrene, septicemia, and probably other complications. I am not too sure as I never really paid attention to the details. I was 3 years old and did not find it particularly interesting. Story 33. Would an attic door falling on a 10-year-old kill him? If so, that would have been the closest for me. It did not hit me directly, but it was close enough for a nail that was sticking out to permanently scar my face. Story 34. I got pulled under the waves for a few minutes, and it felt like my chest was being pressed so hard. I genuinely thought I was not going to make it. It happened twice in 10 minutes. I was very surprised because I am a swimmer, but we should have known not to go in the water with such rough waves. Story 35. I was bitten or stung without knowing it and went to watch the United States Open tennis while smoking a cigarette. I started choking, and my wife was paying attention. Story 36. I have almost been in several car accidents. One of them, at least, probably would have killed me. I am sure I have several more to go. Story 37. During a blood test to diagnose reactive hypoglycemia, my blood sugar dropped from 97 to 38 in less than an hour. Story 38. I fell onto the track of a roller coaster where I worked. There were thousands of volts running through it, and I should have been electrocuted. I jumped up like Spider-Man and got back onto the loading platform. My coworkers did not see, and only one person witnessed it. This was 20 years ago, and I think about it often. Story 39. Hit a duster, a keyboard cleaner spray, while driving down a highway. I ran off the road and bumped into an embankment. The car was fine, and my sister and I were fine, luckily. Story 40. Back in 2008, on our honeymoon, walking along the track between the gondola and the Cavendish Lookout, I tripped and fell about 50 meters toward Littleton. Luckily, I ended up in some brush and did not tumble into someone's backyard. Story 41. I almost drowned when I was 5. My brother thought I was doing handstands in the pool and was laughing. Story 42. By not staying in my mother's womb for another 8 to 9 weeks as I was supposed to. Thankfully, the medicine and training of 90s doctors were enough to keep me alive. However, I did crush my mom's dream of having a third child. I made sure I was the last one. Story 43. I am a type 1 diabetic and developed ketoacidosis, which occurs when blood sugar is high for too long, causing damage to organs. I had to call my mother to have the emergency room staff let me in immediately, without waiting for hours. I fell unconscious on the floor while being asked for my address and who my general practitioner was. Fortunately, I was already in the hospital and they recognized what was wrong. Story 44. I waited 3 days after my appendix ruptured to go to the hospital because my previous medical instructions were to go to the hospital if I felt nauseous. Took that long for the nausea to begin. Story 45. I used to engage in anorexic behaviors, and my body mass index dropped to just under 11. My organs could have failed. Story 46. Almost drowned in a pool, almost drowned in a river while my stepdad watched. Harmed myself twice. Clearly something I am not good at. And experienced a freak medical incident that doctors could not explain, where I began bleeding heavily. Story 47. Car crash. Skidded out on the highway in the rain. Was heading straight at a light post. Life literally flashed before my eyes. As luck had it, a road crew was resealing and had dug a ditch by the side of the road. The wheels slid into that ditch and it gripped my car and slowed me down very fast, almost to a full stop. Without it, I would have hit the pole at least 40 miles per hour. I got away with minor whiplash and 4 completely damaged tires. A truck driver was first on the scene and offered to help only if my then-girlfriend gave him a kiss. Moral: even in the worst situations, people can still be total creeps. Story 48. Had an allergic reaction so severe that I could not breathe. I lost consciousness before being placed into the ambulance. I am sure the emergency medical technicians had it under control, but it was a good 5 to 10 minutes before they arrived. Story 49. I almost drowned at the beach when I was 12. I also got electrocuted while taking a shower. I still don't know how I got out because I could not move. Story 50. I got my pick. I'll go with this one. Party or gathering, hike in, small bonfire. Great time, but at some point, well into the night, I found myself a ways off in absolute darkness with some others, and somehow we were racing each other shimmying up trees. I am a solid to great shimmier, so I got on this tree and realized I was fairly inebriated and it was almost pitch dark. We just had the glare of the bonfire giving us some illumination from one side a ways away. I got decently high up. I contend I was doing well, and I felt this roll of thunder that reverberated through my entire body. I had no clue what was happening as I began to pitch backwards, still hugging the top half of this pine tree. I wasn't like 40 feet up. I must have been approximately 15 feet up because that's the height of the remaining trunk. But I had enough time to know I was dead or mangled for sure. The earth was all bedrock, sharp angles, no flat anything, and I was helpless. I landed, didn't really hurt too badly, and I moved all my parts and got up. Yeah, I picked a dead tree in the dark, and it was rotted out inside. I'm lucky I didn't split my head open or paralyze myself a day's hike into nowhere. I would have had to at minimum wait for help to make it to the main park for cell service. I couldn't believe my luck the next morning. Where I landed was just as ridiculous as I imagined. But here I am, and there I was, essentially uninjured save minor scrapes and bruises. I had zero issues hiking out, full pack and more. To be young. Story 51. My friends and I found one of those big wooden telephone wire spools with one plank missing from the middle, so a 7 or 8-year-old could climb right in and be pushed around. On my turn, it got away and headed downhill. I just remember seeing ground, friends, sky, and a busy road I was heading toward. I hit one of the few trees before reaching the road, and my feet shot straight up as I came to rest vertically, poking out of the middle of the spool. I was pretty sure I was a goner. This was probably in 1978, so I just went home and said nothing. That's just how it was back then. Story 52. I was on my honeymoon with my wife, riding on top of a train heading from the Ecuadorian highlands to Puerto Barrios on the coast. The first section of the journey was slow and picturesque, with many people riding on top of the train. When the train stopped at a station, everyone cleared off the top of the carriages and went inside. We were enjoying the novelty of riding on top, so we stayed put. The train track straightened and the train picked up speed on the flat terrain, but it was still a fun and cool experience. As we approached the outskirts of Puerto Barrios, I turned around and saw a man on the roof that I had not noticed before. He looked like a street beggar about 20 feet away. I thought he looked kind of high as he was lying down. He was smiling at me and waving his arm on the carriage roof. I suddenly realized he was signaling for me to lie down. I told my wife, and we lay down just as the first in a series of low-hanging electrified cables crossed above us. Without that man, whom we did not see again when the train eventually stopped, we would have been swept off the top of the train like bugs by a windshield wiper. I often think of it. Story 53. Take this as a reminder to stay hydrated when taking mental health medication. Dehydration is very serious and caused me to be hospitalized twice. Story 54. Walking along the edge of a road being built, I slipped on the loose metal that was not fully compacted. If it had not been for my arm stopping me, the steel marker peg would have caused serious injury. Story 55. Guillain-Barré syndrome. While recovering from the flu, I developed Guillain-Barré syndrome. Within 48 hours, I went from being a normal 27-year-old to being completely paralyzed and on a ventilator in the intensive care unit. It affected all my muscles, including those used for breathing and swallowing. I also developed double pneumonia. Now, 5 months later, I am almost back to normal. Story 56. Drove with 3 bald tires because I could not afford to buy more than one new one. During the first rainstorm, I slid under a truck and luckily bounced out before hitting the wheels. 1996. Lesson learned. Story 57. Almost drowned in a pool as a toddler. At age 4 or 5, showed symptoms of type 1 diabetes for over a year, but doctors kept telling my mom I was fine. Finally, we went to another doctor who sent me directly to the emergency room. Blood sugar was 1100, severely dehydrated, and in diabetic ketoacidosis. Had a severe low blood sugar episode during surgery, almost had to be flown to the emergency room. Appendix almost burst a few years ago. Story 58. Was shot at, and the bullet missed my head by an inch. Had my skull partially caved in by an axe. Story 59. Almost drowned during a vacation at Great Wolf Lodge when I was 9. I sat on a slide that was made for lying down, hit my head hard, and struggled to get up. I was saved by an elderly man with a mustache. Story 60. A drop of water settled in my throat and caused my airway to close in the shower. My daughter was 2 years old and could not use the phone. I began to lose consciousness, but my gasping made me burp, and I eventually caught my breath. Story 61. Drowning. My mother jumped in and saved me. It was truly horrific, and I still remember the feeling of bobbing up and down but not being able to breathe or yell for help. I was 5 or 6 years old. Story 62. Multiple bilateral pulmonary embolisms due to a previously undiagnosed autoimmune disorder approximately 10 years ago. Story 63. Squeezing onto a roller coaster with 4 seats with my parents and 2 sisters was a thrill ride. Honorable mention Woodstock 1994 for 3 close calls. 1. I was standing a little too far out for the buses that were picking us up to take us back to where we parked, and a bunch flew past me at full speed just inches away. 2. In the crowd. I hate it. See the edge and work my way there. Stop dead in my tracks. It's like a 50-foot drop. 3. Driving home after 2 days of hell, we skipped Sunday. My brother-in-law fell asleep at the wheel, and the van ran off the road. Story 64. Nearly drowned in the wave pool at Hurricane Harbor in Texas around 2000. My cousin, in his inner tube, ended up pushed on top of me, and I couldn't get up with the waves. The pool was full of people, so no one noticed. I loved swimming before that. Afterwards, I ended up back in level 1 swimming lessons because I could no longer put my face in the water, and I never made it past that again. More than 20 years later, I can go underwater but only for a few seconds while manually plugging my nose. Story 65. I was leaving a party, sitting in the back seat of our designated driver's car, who was completely sober. He turned left in front of a semi-truck that was going too fast. We got hit at about 45 miles per hour and spun into a telephone pole. All I can say is thank God for Subaru. I still remember the police saying, "These kids should be dead," as they surveyed the scene. But we were in a 2016 Subaru, which was the top safety pick that year. Almost 10 years later, I'm a mom, and you can bet we bought a Subaru as the car to drive the kids around in. Story 66. Car accident in 2001. I was not wearing a seatbelt. The car flipped 5 times. I ended up with a broken shoulder blade, collarbone, memory loss, concussion, and several cuts on my ears. I am very lucky to be alive. Oddly, there was a car accident the same night literally down the street from where ours happened, and all of those girls died. Wear your seatbelts, everyone. Story 67. I had pneumonia when I was 4 months old, and I am very grateful that antibiotics exist. I was thrown from a moving car when I was 8 years old, before seatbelts were mandatory. I fell asleep behind the wheel of a car and almost went off the road when I was 20. Do not attempt a 4-hour drive by yourself the day after your last all-nighter of sophomore year. Story 68. Suicide attempt with 2 bottles of sleeping pills. I fell asleep but did not stay asleep. Rapid heart rate and low blood pressure. Story 69. Drowning. I had a family reunion at a resort. There was a tall slide and I really loved slides, so that was my first choice. However, I had no idea how to swim, which was a big problem. As I slid, I never expected the water to be 8 feet deep, so I panicked when I couldn't feel the ground. The pool was big and my sister, who couldn't swim either, and I were the only ones there. Both of us were panicking, but I felt worse. I could already see the light. Luckily, everyone noticed, and my father and his cousin rushed to help us. I was very exhausted, but I still wanted to swim, so I swam in the 3-foot kiddie pool. After that, I wouldn't risk going beyond 5 feet. I still love slides, though. I had some other drowning moments, but this one was the worst. Story 70. Eating an entire box of Fiber One bars and Cashy-Go lean in one sitting after indulging in too much of Satan's salad. Story 71. My dad pushed me into the deep end of a swimming pool in an attempt to make me learn to swim faster. It did not work. I almost drowned and did not go near another pool for 5 years. Story 72. I let a friend pierce my nipple when I was 16. I managed to get poison ivy on it, and it became infected. The infection formed an abscess and I developed mastitis. I went to the school nurse who prescribed an antibiotic I was allergic to. then prescribed a stronger antibiotic which I was also allergic to. I developed gangrene and anaphylaxis. Eventually, I got sepsis and had to go to the hospital. Story 73. I borrowed a friend's car to follow a tow truck pulling my wrecked car out of a police impound lot. As the truck was leaving, I realized I never told the driver where I wanted to go, so I guessed he was taking it to his shop. I quickly raced to catch up with him, ignoring the oncoming traffic on the busy highway I cut across. It was pure luck that I wasn't involved in any collisions. Story 74. Drowning 3 times. Twice in grade school and once about 3 weeks ago on the beach just down from where Malcolm Jamal Warner lived. Story 75. Alcohol intoxication. I was so drunk, my resident assistant had to come into my room while I was sleeping to see if I was still breathing. This was nearly 30 years ago. Thankfully, I no longer drink. Story 76. I was thrown off a four-wheeler while sitting on the front rack. Thankfully, the tree root that stopped it held the vehicle in place, preventing it from rolling forward and running me over. Story 77. Overdose on purpose. I should have died. Pneumonia. The left lung was practically filled with fluid. I lost part of my lung. Story 78. I got jumped and beaten badly. I went down knowing that I had landed some good hits before I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital after my friends found me. They told me that I had teeth embedded in my knuckles and showed me pictures. I do not even remember hitting someone in the face. Story 79. I was thrown into a river and told to swim while fully clothed. I could not swim and did not learn despite being told it would come naturally because swimming is a survival instinct. Some people in a boat helped me, and when I got back to shore, I got in trouble for wanting attention and faking it. Story 80. Ruptured ectopic pregnancy at 11 weeks. I did not even know I was pregnant but woke up one morning with blood everywhere. Went to the hospital and found out if I had left it any later, I would be dead. Rushed into surgery to have a fallopian tube removed. I was 21. When I was 23, I tried to take my own life but woke up in the hospital. My university roommate saved my life, but I did not see it that way at the time. When I was 24, I narrowly avoided being one of the Manchester Arena victims. I was working at one of the bars directly opposite where the bomb exploded, but luckily the shutters were down when it happened. Felt like the universe was against me for a few years. Story 81. I was 14 years old and had a hangout at a mountain hill, a small mountain but still quite high up with oncoming traffic below with spiked vodka. One friend went missing, and that incident alone was traumatic enough. A group of guys saw us, the remaining friends. I was the only girl left. They kind of picked me up to push me aside. I assumed their motive was to assault me. I fist-punched one of the guys quite hard in the face, and I guess they did not like that, so they pushed me off the mountain. I was very lucky that, even in my very drunken state, I managed to grab the wall of it. My phone was completely smashed, and being a very young and scared person, I crawled my way back up. My friend had returned by then. We were all very traumatized. I will not go into what happened to her while she was gone, but you can fill in the blanks yourself. Luckily, a group of adults saw us and called the emergency line. This was over 10 years ago now, but the incident still crosses my mind from time to time. Sorry if this is kind of jumbled. English is not my first language. Story 82. Had to have numerous surgeries as a baby, many of them being face and throat surgeries. One of those randomly had the side effect that I would, without warning, stop breathing. It only took one incident before they realized what was going on. But between then and a surgery to fix the issue, I had to be on a monitor 24/7 and experienced numerous incidents before it was fixed. Story 83. Almost drowned in a river. I was stuck in the middle for 1 minute trying to reach the other side. I went under 3 times. On my last push, luckily someone was there on the side, right in the perfect position. He pushed me to safety but sacrificed himself to the flowing water. I assume he made it, but I couldn't thank him. This was in 2022. I am grateful to be here. Story 84. I had my gallbladder removed. I had large gallstones that damaged the nerves there, permanently taking away my ability to feel hunger and fullness, and damaging my bile duct. When they cut my gallbladder away from the damaged duct, It kept leaking bile into my abdomen for 3 days after surgery before I ended up in the emergency room within hailing distance of sepsis. Because bile is similar to stomach acid, I had chemical burns on the walls of my abdomen and abscesses of trapped bile throughout my belly and inside my ribcage in one spot. I spent 10 days in the hospital initially. I needed a stent in my liver, which is placed with a laparoscopic procedure that goes down the throat. The first attempt at placing the stent failed because my duct was too inflamed, and the surgeon accidentally punctured my duodenum, causing a leaking stomach as well. It helped that I didn't feel hunger because I was given no food for 6 days. I had a midline catheter in one arm and an intravenous line in the other because I was receiving fluids, heparin, oxycodone, hydromorphone, a powerful antibiotic, and vitamins. I had a drain tube in my abdomen and a second stent placement before they gave me food, made sure I could keep it down, and sent me home. Recovery took 16 more surgeries in 18 months, but I have permanent, crippling side effects. I still don't feel hunger and never will. It is not a positive experience. My brain receives no signal from my stomach, and the disconnect is hard to adjust to. I had to relearn how to identify when I am hungry. I have to force myself to eat every time because I simply do not want to. The abscesses of trapped bile in my abdomen and abdominal wall are permanent and cannot be removed. They cause pain continuously. Most of the time it is a low-grade, annoying ache, but sometimes I feel sudden, stabbing pain that incapacitates me. Every meal causes pain and often makes me sick. A traumatic injury, like a severe car crash, could rupture one of these abscesses and cause me to become ill again. I may require another stent or even a liver transplant in the future. Story 85. Riptide in my early 40s with my wife and kids watching. My last-ditch effort when I was exhausted was to throw myself toward a breaker, and the current was different there. I got to shore and lay there for 15 minutes, barely able to move. The kids thought it was hilarious. My wife and I understood the severity, and the beach day was done. Story 86. Which time? Pneumonia at 13 years old. Was in the hospital for 10 days. Fell asleep at the wheel and slammed into a guardrail, totaling my Mitsubishi 300 GT. Rescued a lady and her 3 young children from a burning car just before it was completely engulfed in flames. Oh yes, almost forgot. A heart attack and later a total heart block. Now on my second pacemaker and doing just great. Was not doing so well there for a while. Story 87. 1. A passenger in a truck and the driver did not see a sharp turn. The truck went front first down into a ditch at 60 miles per hour. The rear end flipped up and over, and after landing we rolled 3 times. My hand was out the window and was caught between the cab and the ground with every roll. I crawled out of there a bit sore with some cuts, but I have no idea how the injuries were so minor. 2. I have multiple sclerosis and mowed in extreme heat, triggering an attack that damaged the electrical system around my heart sinus nodes, which control my heart rate. The result was sick sinus syndrome, a collection of heart conditions occurring simultaneously. My heart rate can swing widely, jumping and dropping over 100 beats per minute from high to low and back again. It felt like the life was being sucked out of me at times, causing me to drop to the ground from sudden changes. The worst days, before my condition was managed to a functional level, are only recorded on my Apple Watch. I know I exceeded its 210 beats per minute limit often and fell below 30 beats per minute several times, triggering errors. My heart still occasionally tries to harm me. The highest heart rate recorded by my pacemaker was 437 beats per minute, and the lowest was 18 beats per minute. 3. I experienced multiple sclerosis spasms on and off all day for 3 straight days. They call it a spasm, but it is all the muscles in the chest, ribs, and surrounding areas contracting. I would fall to the ground, muscles so tight that I could not inhale. I would lie on the ground gasping for air until it passed. They compare these spasms to heart attacks. I had 5 to 10 of these episodes each day for those 3 days. Story 88. My cousin and I, along with a few friends, were camping at the lake. I am 7 years old, and my cousin is 12. We were both on a paddleboard. My mom's boyfriend at the time was shaking it as a game to see who could stay on the raft the longest. Sounds fun, right? I fell off and got trapped under the paddleboard. Paddleboards can weigh up to 30 pounds. which is about 500 newtons for a 7-year-old. I was trapped under it for about 10 seconds. I do not know how I got out, but I did. I threw up some lake water. On that same trip, my cousin convinced me that Pennywise was in the lake. Story 89. Doctors said it was a stomach flu and that I couldn't keep much down at all for months. They did an MRI and did not inform me that I had a 5-centimeter stomach hernia. Another time, doctors said it was anxiety when it was actually gallbladder attacks. I had 2 gallstones taking up about half of my gallbladder and blocking the bile duct. When they finally listened, I almost needed emergency surgery. Story 90. Tried to push a rolling car back up a slanted driveway when I was 9. It is surprising that I have lived so long. Really? Story 91. Could have died at 18 years old. My friend wanted to race someone while I was in the passenger seat but did not go through with it. Luckily, he did not. Story 92. Meningitis at 9 days old. I almost choked on a piece of food when I was 19. At home, alone, a piece of food went down the wrong way and became lodged. Things started to go blurry, and I had spots floating in front of my eyes. In desperation, I threw myself onto the edge of the bath. The edge hit my abdomen and dislodged the piece of food. Story 93. I got pushed out of a school playground slide. There was a high chance of death, but luckily I only broke my arm. Story 94. Car crash. I was 18. I had just gotten my first car, and I had it for 2 months. I was hit by a drunk driver. My car rolled 3 times and ended on its side. I passed out and was pulled out through the front windshield. Story 95. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My family and I went to a pool, and a random girl pushed me into the deep end. I couldn't swim. She just laughed while I was struggling. My family was not paying attention. I survived because I managed to jump and get out of the pool. I have not gone into a public pool since. Story 96. My dad had a 1957 AJS motorcycle that had been hidden in the back of his garage for more than 30 years. He decided to see if we could get it running. We cleaned it up, changed the lines, and put some gas in it. The motorcycle started on the 3rd kick. I gave it a little gas, popped the clutch, and took off like I was fired out of a cannon. After about 30 feet, I popped a wheelie, nearly got it under control, and then the seat fell off. I flipped the whole motorcycle on top of myself. I escaped with a little road rash, but it could have been much worse since I wasn't wearing a helmet and the bike was very heavy. Yes, I gave it a little gas. It turned out the throttle was broken or stuck because a quarter turn was full throttle. Story 97. I was 3 to 5 years old, and I vividly remember this as my earliest memory. Picture this. On the gator driving down the side of the road, less than 1,000 feet from my aunt's house to my house. I could see my house from her house. Anyway, 3-year-old me was sitting in the passenger seat, around 2010 to 2013, with Grandma in the driver's seat and my baby brother in her lap. Grandma stopped halfway home to pick some berries. She told me to stay put my baby brother down in the seat, and walked about 5 feet away, back turned to pick berries. I got bored, so I got out. Right as I was crossing over to get to Grandma, my brother got down from his chair and pushed the gas. The gator knocked me down, and the wheel ran over my neck. I remember feeling the pressure and looking toward the road where my mom pulled out of my aunt's driveway and drove into ours. I saw Grandma trying to push the gator off me, but failing until my mom came running over and lifted it off me. The next thing I remember is sucking my pacifier, my mom crying, while I sat on someone's lap waiting for the ambulance. And that's it. For so long, I thought it was a dream until they brought it up at a family gathering. Also, there was the time I fell off my mom's bed and cracked my skull, or the time I almost drowned twice, but that's a story for another time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.